Hey everyone, welcome. Today we are going to learn about scriptable objects. So let's get started. So in order to explain what scriptable objects are and how they work, I am going to do that practically. So let me create a really simple UI first of all. So let's just create a simple button. Let's increase its size to 450 by 250. And let's change this text size to be 50, and let's just give it the value of plus. It is 150, and let's create another text mesh. Let's give it the size of 150 as well. Let's make it the full size of the screen and reduce its size to something like this. So now let's create our script. Let's call this my data holder. Open up this script in an editor of your choice. Once the script has been loaded, then let's create a scriptable object. So scriptable objects are basically data containers, and we can create them by basically extending the scriptable object class. And now our data holder is a scriptable object, but we won't be able to see it in the editor or create it. For that, we need to create asset menu, attribute, and now we can actually create this in the editor. So inherently, it is a simple data container which is independent of the scene or any object or a script. So we can right click and go to create, and you can see data holder. So this is our scriptable object. Now, what if we want to add some values or properties to this? For instance, let's give it a simple value of a public integer number of times button has been pressed. Let's give it an initial value of 0. Now let's go back. And as you can see, we can see our variable over here. We can also add functions to our scriptable objects. Let's create a function public void increment, and let's simply increment our number of times that button has been pressed. Now on our button, what we can do is on click, we can just say that our object is going to be this new data holder, and we will call the increment function, which will in turn increment this value. So let's give it a test. Now if I press this button, okay, it's this one, this. As you can see, the value is being incremented. Now if I stop the gameplay, this value will not reset. It will remain in the last state when we basically stop the gameplay. So scriptable objects persist across scenes while we are playing or not playing the game. What else can be scriptable objects used for? Basically, they are data containers, but you can also create different types of architectures and different types of systems around them. So for instance, you can create an inventory system with this. You can also create like a game state manager. So let's go with the example of a game state manager. So for instance, let's say that public void, this is one of our states, which is game over, which will simply say debug.log game over. And here public void start game, this will basically say debug object.log start game. We can create these two functions inside a simple mono behavior as well, but that mono behavior would be present in the scene and you would need to attach it to some game object. And it won't be accessible to all your objects. You have to make it a singleton for that to be accessible to all the objects. So for instance, here on my button, I can now attach a data holder which would say, if I press this, it would basically say start game. And along with start game, I also want this text to be updated. For that, we can do something really easy. Let's create a public event action and let's call this update UI. And what update UI would do is, first of all, let's call a public void invoke update UI. And this would basically, if update UI is not null, then simply invoke it. And we should be able to access this UI somehow. So let's create a script for that. Let's create a simple script. Let's call it UI updater. This script will basically hold references to our UI objects, and let's open up our script. This is going to be a really simple script in which we will have a serialize field, private text mesh pro. Let's just call it text mesh for now, and on enable, and in on disable. And we need access to the scriptable object. Our scriptable object is called data holder, and here say data holder dot update UI plus equal to on UI update, and here we'll say data holder dot update UI minus equal to on UI update. And let's create the function private void. Let's just do it quickly like this. Okay, so on UI update, we are simply going to say that text mesh dot text equal to data holder dot game state. And let's create a public string game state. And on game over, we'll set the game state equal to game over. And on start game, we'll say game state equal to start game. So let's go to our editor. Let's attach our scriptable object, which is this one. Let's attach our text mesh. Let's save. And currently we are only doing a start game. So if I go here and I press this button, this should change to start game. And it didn't change. Why? Let's see. It's because inside our scriptable object, which is this one, it has been changed to start game. But we haven't called the invoke function. We need to call the invoke update UI. So if I start again, and if I click this, it changes to start game. So scriptable objects can be used in many different ways to create inventory systems, shop systems, event systems. And it's a very good way to manage your data. So you can basically create your whole game manager as a scriptable object, which would basically manage the states of your game, or you can create an inventory system if you want to. Let me give you a little practical example. Let me load it quickly. Well, let's wait for it to load. So this is basically a really simple game I'm working on, and here I have two scriptable objects. So this first one is called player data scriptable object, which basically holds the player events and the data related to the player. So here I have a player move event and some of the data that is related to the player. Similarly, level data SO holds data related to the level, and I am using these two objects to basically control most of the states of my game. And I have a game manager which is a singleton, and that holds reference to these two scriptable objects, and in turn I use them whenever I need them. So like game manager instance, and I cache them over here. So the result is basically a very good way to manage my player data without holding hard references or without being dependent on another scene or another script, and I can use them anywhere in my game basically. So it's a really good way to practice and get familiar with scriptable objects by creating some type of small systems which you would basically create using mono behaviors and convert them to scriptable objects. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. See you next time.